Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, your ticket to all things college football. Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? Join us as we talk college football, from the national championship to college rivalries to bowl games to the Heisman Trophy to which conference is the best. We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between.
What up? Welcome into the GSMC Football Podcast on a Wednesday today here. My name is Tom Dougherty, your host, which means this is a college football edition of the GSMC Football Podcast, which, as always, is brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on whatever you're listening to this on, whether it's your Apple Podcast or the new Google Podcasts, as Android finally getting that podcast app to kind of go one place, one-stop shopping that they do on the Apple, on the iPhones. You can go to the Google Podcast app now and find us instead of having to search around for your favorite podcast app, whether you're using CastBox or whatever you may be using on your Android phone. You'll now have Google Podcasts. You'll be able to use that and like and subscribe us and share us with your friends and spread it all around, as we have tons of shows here at the GSMC Podcast Network. If you will find something you like, I guarantee it, whether it's college football, soccer, baseball, NFL, anything. I mean, not even sports stuff. We have everything on here. So go take a look around, go browse around what we have to offer here at the GSMC Podcast Network. But getting into it now, we have college football talk to get to. I'm on the ACC coaches today. ACC is 14 more schools, so we're going to split it up 7 and 7 first segment. In the second segment, then we're going to go into, in the third and fourth segment, we're going to talk about some individual players on to look forward, to watch out for this season, as we always have our preseason All-Americans that comes out, and also some players just, that are due to have a big season. They may have their first chance to get up on the stage, whether it was people leaving the school or going to the draft or whatever. There are some guys that are chomping at the bit to show off their talents. All right, so let's jump right into it to the coaches. We'll start off with the probably the most visible coach in the ACC, and that's probably because his team is the best in the ACC and has been for the last few years, and that's Dabo Swinney down at Clemson. And I mean, Dabo's been never afraid of a microphone, never afraid to put his 2 cents in with pretty much anything that's going on. It seems like these days, whether it's paying college players or having to deal with his players in general, he's always willing to give his 2 cents and tell whether it's ESPN or Fox Sports or whoever's sticking a microphone in his face, he'll give a good comment. So you got to give him credit. But this is a guy who is Alabama alumni. I mean, he's been able to beat his former school once, and then they come back and beat him pretty badly the year after in that vengeance game, that 1-4 matchup we saw last year in the playoff. But I mean, this is a guy who's gotten his team ready. He's gotten his. He's always had the defensive prowess there at Clemson. Now he still has Christian Wilkins still over there with those young defensive linemen, the young core on the in the front seven for him. So he gets his defense ready to go very well, and he's able to. I mean, obviously he had to make the decision, and he still might have to make the decision with the quarterback situation. That's not over yet. Obviously, we're in June, and we're not going to see any games till early September. I think Kelly Bryant being the number one guy on the depth chart right now goes to show you that he probably is going to be just fine right there. But I think that Dabo still has some decisions to make. I don't know if he's going to be able to keep Trevor Lawrence on the sidelines all season long this year and let Kelly just kind of go out there and see what he can do. But we're kind of expecting Clemson, obviously, another undefeated season It's kind of hard when you're expected to be perfect. But in a college football season and a college football culture that it is here in the United States with this, the way it works here is that, yeah, you pretty much can lose one game and better not lose another one. Better not lose another one. And in best case scenario, you go undefeated. So, I mean, in the ACC, he should be fine. We could look at their schedule. We have looked at their schedule a bunch. Clemson, I don't think they have any. I don't even think they play Miami this year, as they should be just fine. Going through the season, as I think the biggest test of the season this year is going to be Texas A&M. To start off on September 8th, and then looking at it, Florida State is October 27th, and that's about it. Maybe that South Carolina game, that interstate rivalry there, could be a good one too. All right, moving on to the next guy. David Cutcliffe is the head coach still at Duke. I mean, you got to give him credit. Duke is a basketball school, and he's actually kind of kept their football program a little relevant. I mean, this is a guy who has worked with Peyton Manning and Eli Manning. He's like one of their best, closest friends to that family, and was a big help with the coaching on the side for those two quarterbacks. He's been kind of the quarterback whisperer. David Cutcliffe has, and down at Duke, I mean, the guy's been there forever. He's been there since 2008, so this is going to be entering his 10th or 11th year. Is that what it is down at Duke? And after being a quarterback's coach at Tennessee, which is where you saw him with Peyton Manning, obviously, and then also the head coach of Ole Miss, which is where good old Eli went to school as well. So he's been with both those guys. Obviously, Peyton Manning. He was with him back in early in the 90s when he was at Tennessee for quite a while before going to Ole Miss, working with Eli, and then going back to Tennessee, and then now at Duke, where he's actually compiled. I mean, at Duke, he's 57 and 67, or 59 and 67. That's not the greatest record, obviously. Still under 500. But when you're working with a team or a school that is the academic caliber of Duke, it's almost the same kind of thing where you have Stanford and Notre Dame, where you only can get the players that are academically able to keep up with the rigorous Duke schedule, and the expectations there. And also it's a basketball school, so the football team kind of gets goes by the wayside. But there's been a couple 10 wins. He's had a 10-win season. He's won a couple bowl games, and hopefully they can keep going this season here, going in. Is Cutcliffe's, I like him. Another guy, Willie Taggart, as we roll on here through these coaches. Willie Taggart's obviously only a little quick pit stop in Eugene, Oregon, before coming back to Florida and taking over the Florida Seminoles job. Obviously, he was at South Florida for 4 years before going over to Oregon, taking over for Mark Helfrich. Helfrich now is the offensive coordinator for the Bears. It's going to be interesting seeing how his expertise transfers over to the NFL side. But now Willie Taggart down there inherits a interesting situation with his quarterbacks. The fact that not only is DeAndre Francois coming back from an injury, but he also had to deal with a bunch of legal stuff this offseason. James Blackman has been in his office all offseason. He's been on the facility all offseason, has been working his tail off to try and retain his starting position that he was basically given last season due to the injury to Francois. So we'll see if it is going to keep up that way, or if Francois will just will take over his position once again. Down at Oregon, obviously, you get hired and you think that you're going to be there for a while, but high profile jobs breed high profile jobs. So he was down in Oregon. Obviously, he has impress Florida State enough, I guess, in his time with UCF and then with Oregon as well, to do well. I mean, with Oregon, he was 7-5 last year and did play in the Las Vegas Bowl, but he did not coach in it due to the fact that he was already leaving for Florida State. All right, moving on to the the outlook obviously for Florida State is high because of the ACC. I mean, them and Clemson and Miami are the three powers in the ACC, and you have the talent, and he's a good recruiter, so I think he should be down there for quite a while probably at Florida State. Don't see him trying to jump ship at all anytime soon. Next up is Paul Johnson at Georgia Tech. I mean, Georgia Tech, they don't really get the press, obviously, the pub that you have with all those other schools. They kind of get forgotten. But this is a school that has bred some very good college players. And Paul Johnson down there when you get to play down in Miami, in Atlanta, you can kind of get lost in the hubbub. But I think that what he's been able to do down there is not too shabby. I mean, 75 and 45 career record, but Georgia Tech, he's been very good as. The guy's got his career record actually is 182 and 93. With Georgia Tech, he's 75 and 45. 3 bowl wins. Last year had a bit of a rough season with that 5-4 record. Hopefully he can get that turned around as they play in that Coastal Division, which is can be kind of tough. Honestly, that you have to deal. I think the Coastal Division is the one without Clemson, or is the one with Miami? Because I think Miami and Clemson are in opposite divisions. Hold on here. We're gonna get it all up for you here as we have the ACC standings, and I can actually tell who's in the Clemson's in the Atlantic. Clemson's in the Atlantic, Miami's in the Coastal. So I was right. As Georgia Tech, last year 5-6. Obviously, when you got to deal with Virginia Tech and Miami, trying to get, if they can try and leapfrog Virginia Tech, you can be set right under Miami and then maybe stun them. As their schedule this year shouldn't be too bad. Obviously, Pittsburgh hopefully bounce back season after being 5-7 last year, and then I don't really see anything else having to be a threat there. Florida State obviously hoping to bounce back after they were 7-6 last year. Ended up turning it around a little bit, but nothing really going there for the ACC. Can be kind of weird because they're trying to obviously pull up in football and everything, more of a basketball conference. But even when you have Georgia Tech out there, it's a tough. You can't take them lightly. You got to play them well. All right, next up, Bobby Petrino at Louisville. Obviously, he had a great talent. He had Lamar Jackson. And I think Lamar's gone. Obviously, he's a Baltimore Raven now. But Bobby Petrino has always been. He's been a guy who's run a pro style offense, which is another reason why I think that the Ravens actually did trade back up and get Lamar Jackson, because they do like the fact that he comes from a Bobby Petrino offense. He's been playing under a guy who's been in the NFL for a little bit. And he has shown off that he has the ability to prepare quarterbacks. And when you have a guy come back to Louisville, obviously he's had a bunch of issues as well. But when Charlie Strong leaves, he comes back to Louisville and he's just like, I'm going to turn this guy into an NFL quarterback. And that's what he's done for this outlook of the season. You kind of don't know, obviously, the quarterback situation. I'm assuming they have. He's got to figure out what's going to be next there. Lamar Jackson's just don't go on trees. They don't go on trees, but he's got to be able to have a. We haven't really talked about the Louisville quarterback competition yet, as we have too many. There's just so much going around, obviously. And we'll have to make a decision, obviously, by Petrino regarding what he's going to do down with the new quarterbacks there. But in his second stint at Louisville, it's been pretty good. Hasn't ever had the most success in those bowl games, but has been 75 and 27, which is not too shabby whatsoever. All right, next up is on this first segment we want to get through here is Mark Richt. And I love Mark Richt, honestly. I think he got kind of shafted at Georgia. I think that he was left too early. I think he could have turned that team into what Kirby Smart turned it into. I don't think you get that much difference. Maybe Kirby Smart being a little more defensive. But Mark Richt has had a great career. He goes down to Miami, kind of makes a nice little pivot right to from the SEC to the ACC, gets down to Miami and turns that team into a fun team that's fun to watch too. You got him down there with a turnover chain, all rah on the sidelines. Hopefully, he can get him going like they were last year, and then not have the quite the downturn that they had at the end of the year last year. Obviously, losing the last 3 games, but this was a team that was thought about making the college football playoff. They win the ACC championship game. They have a chance to definitely have a conversation, be in the conversation regarding the beginning of the college football playoff. They were highly ranked. They were undefeated for quite a while, and Mark Richt can do that. I think this year, coming back with Rozier, Malik Rozier, and that defense, they can definitely do it again. All right, was that the first 6 or 4? That's the first 4. Or first 6, I have one more Larry Fedora, or we'll keep that for the next. We'll keep that for the next segment. We'll come back with Larry Fedora of the North Carolina Tar Heels on the other side of the break. So stay tuned.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
All right, welcome back to GSMC Football Podcast, the college football edition here on a Wednesday. As we're going through the coaches in the ACC. As one of the newer coaches in the ACC, only been 2 years at Virginia, is Bronco Mendenhall after an excellent stint with the BYU Cougars. He was there for quite a while, 11 seasons at BYU. So definitely a guy who has success. He knows how to win. He's won 2 conference titles. Obviously, they were Mountain West titles back in 06 and 07. But I mean, the guy's never had a losing record at BYU. Had to deal with a crop of kids at Virginia that probably weren't his recruits. And I mean, you're going against a little bit tougher competition, obviously. BYU was independent actually for the last 5 years of his tenure there with the Cougars. He was never was below with a record never worse than 8-5. So that's when they were independent and had to kind of make their own schedule. Never really in a conference where you knew who you're playing. I mean, when you knew who you're playing, you probably have the same kind of deal as Notre Dame, where you play probably one conference, like the Notre Dame plays these ACC schools a lot. But now he's Virginia. Obviously, had a rough little go of it. The beginning of his time, a 2-10 start, and then went 6-7 last season. Ended up with a loss in the Military Bowl. But I mean, this is a guy who knows what he's doing. I mean, I'm not afraid of what. He has the whole. I think he's going to be just fine there. Virginia can get his own players in there with a recruiting class, get some turnover on the roster, find a quarterback. I mean, at Virginia, obviously, that's not they've been actually turning in more to a basketball power. Obviously, we know what happened to them a few months ago with their being the first team ever to lose when they were the number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament. But this is a college football show, so we're talking football. But this is a school who hasn't really had much football prowess in the last few years. I can't think of an NFL player coming from Virginia any recently. So hopefully Bronco can help the Cavaliers win a few more games this coming season, and I think that'd be just fine. At the other school in Virginia, it's Virginia Tech. Justin Fuente Justin Fuente was a new hot hire. I mean, he was obviously had his choice to make. I think he had a couple different options for himself after he did leave Memphis, obviously turning Memphis into a pretty productive school, obviously, after a 3-9 start. So, I mean, look at this. So he starts 3-9 at Memphis and then goes 10-3, 9-3. Which is pretty nice. I mean, obviously, he did not coach that bowl game because he was already leaving for Virginia Tech after Frank Beamer retired, and he made the decision to be his replacement. But you saw what he did at Memphis, turning them around. You probably think Bronco Mendenhall could do the same thing at Virginia. There's definitely a room to grow. But now at Virginia Tech, he's bounced right in there into this ACC and has jumped right on a nice run. As obviously in 06 he did have a chance to win the conference title game. They did lose at the Clemson in 16, but won that Coastal Division and played in the conference title game, and then ended up playing in the Belk Bowl and winning that one. So did lose their bowl last year. But always been a fan of Justin Fuente. Kind of wished he went to maybe a little bit higher, a bigger. Virginia Tech's they're more of your old. I don't want to say old school, but definitely more of your like 90s, early 2000s. Frank Beamer's tenure there at Virginia Tech was definitely turned that franchise up a notch when it into the public eye. Hopefully, Justin Fuente can keep them there. They are. In the ACC right now, when you think ACC, you think Florida State, Miami, and Clemson. You don't really think Virginia Tech usually. This season, if he can turn in another 10-11 win season. Last year they were 9-4. If they win that game and if they win their bowl game, they're 10-4. So 10-3, like they were the year 10-4. They've been 10-3. But then you have a chance if you can get through and making a run for it this season. And if you can get through in the, you're in the Coastal Division. Like I said, you're not having to deal with Clemson in your own division. You just have to basically leapfrog Miami. If you can leapfrog Miami, you were right on their heels last year, so you'll be just fine there in the Coastal Division. You can have another chance to make it to an ACC championship game once again, and that's Justin Fuente, who I like. Obviously, he did replacing Frank Beamer. He was coach of the ACC Coach of the Year in his first season in the ACC after the regular season. They did take care of Arkansas in that bowl game after they were down 24-0. So he's got resilience. He's got a good offensive idea of what's going on there. Obviously, he was an offensive coordinator with TCU, quarterbacks coach as well. That was a little bit before, I think before Andy Dalton, but looks like that this is a guy who I think is going to be just fine at his not new job, but job he's been at for a couple years now, and we'll see if he can move, if he's going to even find another place. You saw Willie Taggart last at Oregon for 1 year before he got another offer to go to Florida State. This is a guy who's been a hot coach. Obviously, Tom Herman kind of took that over, and when he got the Texas job, but this is a guy who could pretty much probably get a job anywhere. You saw what he did and what he can do with programs that probably are scuffling a little bit, and he can turn them around for the better for sure, because I think that this is a guy who knows, but he obviously knows his offenses and knows what to do in college football. All right, next up is at Syracuse, you have Dino Babbers. Obviously, Syracuse, you have a situation where pretty much you're looking for an upset every time. This is This isn't really the biggest football power, more of a basketball school. But obviously, last year, this is his third season entering at Syracuse, coming off of 2, 4, and 8 seasons in his first 2 stints there. So if they can get maybe a little easier schedule, or what they're planning on is, obviously last year they did have that big upset as one of their wins. But this isn't a team that's really expected to do much in the ACC. Hopefully you can turn that around a little bit. A team that should be expected to do a little more, I think, the Pitt Panthers with Pat Narduzzi last year, obviously they were the spoilers for Miami, but did not have the best year last year. Obviously, were down in the rank. Only 5-7 were second worst team in their division. It could even be the third worst team in their division with only 5 wins. But I think this is a program that's had pedigree, had prowess, and is always a tough test when you have to go to their house and play. So they play well at home, and they can hopefully turn things around this season and be a little better. They got 4 of the 5 wins last year at home, and then if you can, watch them. They could be a stun. They could be the team that will stun you. Just look at Miami. They were well on their way to being a team that could be heavily considered for a spot in the college football playoff, and they run into a Pitt team that beats them on a Sunday or Saturday morning, and I guess whether Miami came out flat or Pitt came out hungry, whatever happens. And I like Pat Narduzzi. Have been a fan, and he's a guy who could definitely turn that program around a little bit more. He's been there since only 2015. And in his time, obviously, this is his first job as a head coach. After being at Michigan State, he's a defensive guy. So if he can get that going, obviously, his first 2 seasons there, 2 8-win seasons, and then comes in with a 5-7. So it was a little bit, pretty much just a down year for Pitt, as like I said, they're not used to being in the bottom half of the standings. They're used to being on the top, as they hope to turn that around this season. I think Pat Narduzzi will get them ready and prepared just fine for this upcoming one. Next is we did talk about it skipped over Larry Fedora. I said that he was up first in this segment, but we skipped over Larry Fedora in North Carolina, another school that gets a little bit of heat. I mean, not that much heat, but they get a little heat from their the paper class scandal. But this is more of a basketball school, obviously. North Carolina, they do have a nice little feather in their cap for getting a quarterback into the NFL, with Mitchell Trubisky being the second pick overall last year. But this is a coach. I mean, obviously more of the same when it comes to the old football coach at a basketball school. You're trying to figure things out. Obviously, he was at Southern Mississippi for a little bit, and then coming off an offensive coordinator job at Oklahoma State, where, I mean, this is that's a team where you can try and turn things around. I mean, obviously at North Carolina, he's had success. He's had an 11-win season before. He's gotten a chance to play in the conference title game, obviously. So, I mean, he's won a conference title as well, Conference USA title with Southern Miss, that pretty much got him the job at North Carolina. He's done well. I mean, he's been in the top 2-3 times. I mean, he's been around the top. So, I mean, last season was a bit of a down year. Obviously, trying to figure out who your next guy is going to be after losing in Mitchell Trubisky has got to be quite a hit, as that roster turnover and trying to get the next top you're not going to get, the thing is, you're probably not going to get a top recruit. If you're in Carolina, you're recruiting that area. Clemson's going to have a big pull. So is South Carolina. The Gamecocks are going to have a big pool if you have kids that want to play in the SEC. So you're kind of getting that second-tier kid, unless you go out and start expanding your range a little bit. You could try and use the North Carolina pedigree, the great campus, great camaraderie there in Chapel Hill to try and coax a couple top recruits over to play for the Tar Heels. I mean, you want to be part of a good sports program. This is a school that's had a great baseball program, a great football program in the past for a little bit, and then also being in the storied basketball program with Coach Williams over there. You can't go wrong with the Tar Heels. All right, next these are a couple schools you don't really mean. NC State. They've had some sneaky teams. Obviously, they've had some great talents last year on the defensive side with Bradley Chubb. Obviously, they also had another defensive guy, Hill, who was a big draft pick as well. But obviously, Bradley Chubb going in the first round, top 5th pick overall, is the one that gets the big tag on him. But down there, you have Dave Doran, and he could be a guy who, I mean, he's been there since 2013. So if you can get, I mean, the thing is, longer you're at any school, I think the more you have. I mean, he's had a couple of recruiting classes, but this is a guy he's 3-1 in bowl games. I mean, he's been able to get in the standings of the ACC Atlantic Division, which can be pretty tough when you have Clemson in there. I think Florida State's even in that division as well. Florida State's in there as well, so you have to deal with that. They were second last year in that division with the 9-4 record overall, 6-2 in conference. So, and they won the Sun Bowl, looking to get right back in there. I mean, hopefully, if you can try and push forward, it's going to be tough to try and leapfrog Dabo Swinney and the Clemson Tigers. But I mean, this is a coach who has been able to have success with Northern Illinois. That's what got him to this job at NC State with the 2 conference title games. Did get his team to the Orange Bowl as far, but that's before he left for NC State, obviously. But yeah, 4-1 bowl games. Is a guy who's had a winning record in his career, defensive guy. Obviously knows how to recruit defensive players and get guys ready for the NFL. So I think this is a team that when you start on defense, all you need to find is that one quarterback and then get a good offensive coordinator, and you'll be just fine. So it looks like the NC State looking for a strong season this year yet again. And then the last coach that I have yet to talk about on this show is Dave Clawson at Wake Forest. As Wake Forest alone, well, actually there's a couple private schools in this conference, but Wake Forest kind of gets forgotten too. Wake Forest was a big basketball program when they had. I mean, this is a school that's had Chris Paul and Tim Duncan. Never really known as a big football school, as obviously last year they were kind of around the bottom of the division they were in. But this is a guy in Dave Clawson who's been around the block of quite a bit. I mean, he's been with Fordham, Richmond, Bowling Green, now at Wake Forest, and Actually, last year they were 8-5 and they won the Belk Bowl. So you got to give them credit. I mean, you got to give them ability. Obviously, you can see the trajectory: 3-9, 3-9, 7-6, and then 8-5 turns it around and gets that winning couple back-to-back seasons with a winning record. If you can get that, you're in that conference. You're in that tough division, the Atlantic Coast, in the Atlantic Division. In that in this conference, we're going to have to play NC State, Louisville, Clemson, Boston College, Florida State. If you can try and get a win against all of those other schools like Boston College and Syracuse, maybe even steal one against Louisville, then you can really see your conference record go the way you want it. Last year they were 4-4. The year before they were 3-5. So if you can get that on the side, 500 side, on the positive side of 500, maybe like a 5-3 conference record, you can see that you'll see that overall record go up a little bit as well, because they seem to handle their non-conference just fine. All right. That'll wrap it up for the segment and for the coaches in the ACC. We'll come back on Friday and do the coaches in the Big 12. When we do come back from this break, though, we're going to start going over some players to watch for this season. So everybody stay tuned, and we'll talk about some guys looking to break out for their schools this year. Stay tuned.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA Podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, welcome back to GSMC Football Podcast, the college football edition, as we're going to go through some players to watch for this season. Some of them are going to sound a little familiar, obviously, because they've been around for a little bit, but there's also some guys that maybe you haven't heard of either that are looking to break out this season. But one guy that needs to have a kind of a renaissance year back to his sophomore year is Jake Browning. And this is a guy who's up at Washington, quarterback, obviously, was a decorated high school player. Talked about him a lot on the show because I went to high school with him. But yeah. Hopefully get him on the show eventually here when the training camp starts and he's back on the football field. But let's talk about this season a little bit, as Washington hopes to take over that dominance that you've seen in the Pac-12. Honestly, Stanford's been the most successful over the longest time. We'll get to a Stanford player eventually here, but they've been most successful for the longest time. Obviously, Andrew Luck, and then Christian McCaffrey comes in. You win a couple conference championships. Washington hopes to usurp them and become the conference champion this season. Obviously, them being in the same conference begs the question: is the head-to-head matchup going to come up with anything? It came down. I think Washington State actually had something to do with it last year as well. But you got Jake Browning in there. His final season, looking that he's got a lot to. Obviously he's got something to prove. Obviously, we saw what he can do when he's at his best sophomore season, when he was able to put up all those numbers and then get talked about Heisman Trophy possibilities and everything as a sophomore. Then he goes and to the college football playoff, plays Alabama, gets knocked around a little bit, has a shoulder injury, and basically plays hurt all of last season with that sore shoulder. Couldn't really get the drive behind the ball. Still has who's there? Miles Gaskins is their running back. Does lose Dante Pettis. I'll have to find a new favorite receiver on the outside. But there's definitely guys to do there. You got Chris Peterson, one of the better recruiters in the league, especially in the big Pac-12. That'll definitely get some talent for him this season. But I think this is a guy who is going to be able to take over for a NFL team eventually, or maybe be a pretty good backup in the NFL as well. He's still a young kid, obviously. Getting through this season is going to be a big deal for him, and if he can put some rack up those numbers like he did this coming in his sophomore season, you'll probably hear about him in the Heisman Trophy talks. I mean, it's not really, basically it's him and Trace McSorley and maybe Will Grier for as far as quarterbacks, but right now the running backs are dominating the Heisman Trophy talk, and that's going to push me into my next guy, and that's going to be Jonathan Taylor at Wisconsin. In Wisconsin, I mean, you know how I feel about Wisconsin and how I feel about that that Big Ten West division, and how everything over there seems to just be a little bit easier. But I think that with Jonathan Taylor, you can see the raw talent, you can see everything that he can do. I mean, you got to be able to. I mean, with him, he's only going to help Alex Hornibrook even more, take more pressure off him. So if he can be a guy who is going to be that every down back and be in there for also pass catching. I mean, the thing is, running backs. Nobody really realizes how tough running backs have it in college in football at all. I mean, you have to run the ball, which is your primary thing to do there. You see Jonathan Taylor, even in his freshman year, is able to put up some numbers, but you have to pass block usually. Not usually, but when it's a passing, you're going to be pass blocking if you're not going out for a pass. And then obviously, also you need to know your routes when you go out for a pass. So I mean, this is a guy. Where I'm looking at I'm trying to look where his stats last year for him, and he did put up 3 touchdowns in a game. He had three multi-touchdown games and a bunch of games, 2 games over 200, well over 200 yards rushing. I mean, another game 3 games actually with over 300 yards rushing, 200 yards rushing. So I mean, this is a guy who's been explosive in the past, and I mean, he's got to take pressure off Alex Hornibrook. He's got to be able to really establish a run game for that Wisconsin team. I think they should be just fine with that schedule they have this year. He'll probably put up some more numbers this season. Obviously, his first season, over 1,800 yards rushing, 13 touchdowns in the year last year. So you can't knock that, as he was definitely a big back for a big part of that offense, and he'll do it again this season, I'm sure. I mean, running backs in college, quarterbacks can have a tendency. I mean, you need to have. It's nice to have weapons on the outside. You almost need weapons on the outside to be a successful quarterback. But running backs, just have your offensive line be a little bit better than the offensive lines you're going to play, and he'll take over from there. Because it's just talent and speed and physical ability better than your competition, basically. So you rise to the top. You find the cream rise to the top in college football, especially in the Big Ten West, pretty soon, pretty quickly. And you'll find that Jonathan Taylor, I mean, even after what he did last year, is going to come in and probably have another year and really battle out the next guy I want to talk about. That's Bryce Love for that Heisman Trophy this season. But yeah, Bryce Love will have something to say about it for sure. Down at Stanford, they were able to manage him, and the injury last year with him kind of play off, play on, where he'd go back and forth. But down there with that Stanford situation at quarterback, they still haven't really made a decision yet. It's nobody's job outright. I think it's KJ Costello's job to lose. But Bryce Love is definitely that running back number one. Stanford always seems to have the next guy up. Whether it was, they had a couple other guys. I can't remember their first names, but they had a guy whose last name was Taylor. I know that, but then they obviously had Christian McCaffrey and then Bryce Love at the same time. And now then Love in his first season by himself last year went off, and then this year hopefully he can stay fully healthy the entire season, because this is a guy who just has the speed and the ability to break off some major runs. I mean, this is a guy, I'm not sure if he's quite the Saquon Barkley explosion, but he's almost there, because I mean, you can see in his ability and the numbers he put up last year as a junior. I think this is what in his full, in this season. I mean, look at what did I just say for Jonathan Taylor? 1,800 yards. This is 1,900 yards, almost 2,000 yards. He was 27 yards away from breaking, basically one rush attempt or a couple of rush attempts away from breaking 2,000 yards. But 1,900 yards, 17 touchdowns last year for Stanford. So I mean, not too shabby there, as you have to deal when you have to deal with the Stanford running game. You have to deal with them and with their big linemen that they seem to have every single season at Stanford. I mean, you gotta love it. I mean, Bryce Love, you got lots of room back there, buddy. And I mean, also start running those big gainers. Obviously, I mean, he had a game last year against ASU where he ran for 300 yards. 300 yards. I mean, the fact that I was 30 yards on 25 rush attempts. I mean, that's called efficiency right there, my friends. Efficiency. I mean, do the math on that one. I mean, even if 25 yards, 25 rushes, 100 yards is 4 yards a carry. I mean, times that by 3, 12 yards a carry almost. With this for this guy, and 3 touchdowns in that game as well. I mean, he's just been explosive. I mean, you see the same thing kind of from Saquon Barkley when he was at Penn State. They just find a hole and they run, but all of a sudden he's just past the secondary. Bye, deuces, friends. Like, see ya. We're gonna stay in the Pac-12 for the next guy, and his name is Khalil Tate. He's obviously up there as well when it comes to. When it comes to guys who looking for a Heisman Trophy, obviously you have to get through Jake Browning and Tua Tagovailoa and Trace McSorley and Kelly Bryant also as well, as probably if he can have a good year this year. But Khalil Tate doesn't get quite the pub that he probably deserves because he plays for Arizona. But I think this year with the new coach and Kevin Sumlin with a very high octane mentality, I think he's going to be a good thing for him because. With the fact that Arizona is not going to be, I mean, you lose Rich Rod's gone. You don't have to deal with Rich Rod anymore. Now it's Kevin Sumlin. He's going to have a very loose, very high octane, loud atmosphere there. I mean, last year he was, well over 60% completion percentage. I mean, you got to love that. Passing for almost 1,300 yards last season with 9 touchdowns. So, I mean, that's not playing 2 games 3 games actually last year he didn't play. So he came in that at the end of the year and put together some nice little performances for the Wildcats. And I mean, he's pretty dynamic too. I mean, the guy can run, he's fast, and his ability to get the ball down the field as well. So, and he's still a pretty young kid, only a sophomore coming in this season. Next one up, we're gonna go move over from the Pac-12 and go to. Well, let's go. Who we want next? We want to go to. Let's go over to Penn State. Trace McSorley. Obviously, Trace McSorley is a guy where he's a Heisman Trophy candidate for sure. I think he's a little undersized, but was able to in the clutch win games. I mean, you saw what he did in a game late for Penn State last season. Was able to find an open receiver as time expires. I mean, this is a guy who knows that offense, knows that how to run that, and knows James Franklin. It means this is a guy who's probably looking to get in the NFL as well. So he's got a lot to prove in his senior season. Trace McSorley, that is. I mean, no Saquon Barkley security blanket this year anymore. So I mean, this year. Whether it's going to be him and switching off with their backup, they have also backup Tommy Stevens as well there at Penn State. I think that Penn State's offense is pretty in good hands, and is in good hands for the next 2 seasons at least. With Trace McSorley this year, it's going to be his show. You don't have no more Saquon to steal the show, no more Saquon to hand the ball. Oh, all of a sudden he's 50 yards on the field in the end zone, drives over, touchdown, Nittany Lions. Now it's probably going to be a lot more West Coast offense, a lot more dink and dunk down the field. Trace McSorley running the ball as well. Obviously, they're going to have an heir apparent to Saquon Barkley at Penn State, but if he's not going to be on that level and be able to carry a load like Saquon did, it's going to be up to Trace McSorley this year, and definitely a guy to watch for, as he has been his whole career. I mean, this is a guy who's been pretty successful. Obviously, we do have to, at the end of this, I'm going to do my quick little Tua Tagovailoa mention. Obviously, Jalen Hurts is also there too. I think that Jalen's going to be gone, though. If Tua is made the starter, Jalen's already said that he wants to be out of Alabama. I thought Michigan was a good area for him to go, but they got their quarterback in Shea Patterson already. It's not really a big program that's like really yearning for a quarterback right now. I mean, you got Malik Rozier's down in Miami. Obviously there's competitions everywhere. Joe Burrow now is at LSU. That was pretty much the only school that I think was really, maybe Texas, I guess, if you really can think you're better than Sam Ehlinger. which he probably is. So Texas could be an option for him. Texas A&M also could be an option for him as well if he wants to stay. I don't think they let him stay in conference, or if anything, they let him go to the other side of the conference. But down there, you got to watch out. I think Tua is going to get the start this year, and he's definitely the more prototypical passing quarterback that we're going to see again now at Alabama. We've seen a lot of passers come out of Alabama where it's less running, more passing, like an A.J. McCarron or a why can't I think of his last name at all right now? He works for ESPN and does a lot of their play-by-play color and color analysts for college football. I'll think of his name in a minute. But Alabama, they're going to finally have a slinger, and I think he's going to be able to really get the ball on the field. Obviously, they still have Boskar. I think did he get drafted? Obviously, going to have still some good running back there. Alabama's always have a top talent in the country, so Tua will have some weapons to use. All right, I'll wrap it up for this segment. We'll come back and touch on a few more players as we cut through this college football episode here on a Wednesday. Be back on Friday for some more college football talk as well. So everybody stay tuned. One more segment, and we'll finish it up for the day today. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
All right, welcome back to GSMC Football Podcast, the college football edition, as we've been going through some players to watch for this season. We did Jake Browning, Jonathan Taylor at Wisconsin, Khalil Tate at Arizona. Obviously, talking a little bit about the quarterbacks at Penn State. That's Will Grier, also at Alabama. Another guy is the guy who has not quite. I don't know if Urban Meyer has really decided quite yet on who's going to be his next quarterback, but obviously you lose a guy like JT Barrett. Obviously, he was there for 4 years, so you're going to have some guys who have been trying to get on the field at least, or been trying to show off that they have the ability to be the next guy at Ohio State. Obviously, they have had a couple different guys step in when Barrett's been injured. So whether it's going to be Dwayne Haskins or Tate Martell this year, I think it's going to be Dwayne Haskins. So Dwayne Haskins is going to be the guy to watch this season for sure. In his first full season as the starter, I'm kind of just saying he's going to be the starter this year. Joe Burrow's gone, and Dwayne Haskins was the guy who played a lot for JT Barrett when he was out with the injury last year. So it looks like that it's going to be a competition that goes down to the end, but I think that Haskins already kind of has the ability to kind of push himself above him. I mean, Tate Martell obviously is a guy who's been a highly touted recruit as well. I mean, went to Bishop Gorman, didn't play last year as a redshirt freshman, but I mean, this is a guy. Dwayne Haskins is a little bit older with his redshirt sophomore, so class older than him, and both guys were able to sit out and get some grooming underneath their belts. Obviously, Dwayne Haskins has had a chance to get on the field. Obviously, when he did step in for JT Barrett, led the Buckeyes to a win against Michigan, actually, and he did finish last season with a 40 for 57 completions, 575 yards and 4 touchdowns, only 1 pick. So maybe get that pick out of there, but 40 for 57 is pretty darn good if you're looking at that. As obviously this is an interesting battle. I think that Haskins definitely has a chance to has the upper hand to win it as being the older guy and being the more experienced guy. But you can't count out Tate Martell. Obviously, was a very talented high school player and has played at one of the top high school programs in the country there at Bishop Gorman. So I think that maybe the size get down to who can do what. For everything, but I mean, this is a plan that has probably been thinking about a lot for Urban Meyer. Obviously, when it comes to Tate Martell, he can be a dual threat, and you're probably going to see. This isn't the first time we've had an issue. Obviously, we had Jones over there at Ohio State with JT Barrett. And then obviously have to come in and win a national championship as a freshman. But this is a situation for Tate Martell to show off what he can do on the field in other aspects of it, whether it's not throwing the ball, but showing off his running, his with his legs and everything. I think that Urban Meyer does have a plan. For Tate Martell. Obviously, I think that they did decide Dwayne Haskins was going to be the guy they're rolling with this season. But Martell is going to also play. Obviously, I think he's going to have some. He's also going to have some time at quarterback as well. They're going to run that 2 quarterbacks situation like they have before in the past. But Urban Meyer has noted that you're going to see him also in a running back wide receiver hybrid role where he's going to be able to use his legs. So both those guys, I'm going to make them both guys to watch for this season. As we'll see if that Ohio State offense can be as dynamic as it has in the past, because they're fun to watch when they are. Because they usually have some very good, talented guys, and we see a lot of guys as well go to the NFL from Ohio State. We've already saw, especially on the defense as well, with Denzel Ward becoming one of the highly touted draft picks of the season, and could probably become one of the top corners in the NFL. Obviously, going to Cleveland, but it's going to be begging the question: okay, what's he going to do? How long is he going to be there for? All right, next guy, Will Grier. I want to talk about obviously down there at West Virginia, as a guy who has been around for quite a while. Obviously, was down at Florida for a little bit as well, but now he's at West Virginia. Has had a chance to get a season or two under his belt as a starter. Threw for 34 touchdowns last year. Was a winner of the newcomer award last year in the Big 12, and put on a good show. They're expected to even be better this season, as that offense, not only they have more weapons on the outside, but he also has shown the ability. I mean, they've also shown the ability to have some more protection on the inside with the line, and which only is going to lead to better success for your offenses. Like I've preached this whole time, I think, on this show, since I ever took over this show, that the line play, offensive and defensive line play in college football, and honestly in any level of football, is paramount. And if I would beg you, go watch film or go watch some highlights and just watch the line of scrimmage. Don't watch those skill players on the outside. Watch the line of scrimmage, and you can probably tell what's going to happen on a play just based off of what the line, how the linemen do, where the push is going to be. It's the offensive getting more leverage, the defense getting more leverage, this and that. So obviously there's going to be some broken plays where the defense will get penetration, then the quarterback will make a play and extend it, and that's why group football is so great, because it's not a done deal if your line does get beat, but it does help. Obviously, it's going to be it's a long game. You have a lot of plays, and over a course of the time, the line that has whether it's the offensive line or the defensive line that has more push for their side, is going to probably be having more success. But Will Grier definitely can benefit from that, and he's going to be a guy who who's had the success, has had the ability to show what he can do at West Virginia for a season, and now is going to be coming into his final season. I think this is his final season of eligibility, and he'll as a redshirt senior for sure, to show off what he can do and hopefully help his draft stock in the NFL, maybe get in there as a maybe a second, third, fourth round guy coming into next season in the draft, because that's where you're going for. This is going to be basically a big job interview for him this season with West Virginia. Obviously, you want to have fun with your team, but you also kind of have to be singular, where you're like, yeah, I'm going to be a guy. I'm going to be, after this is over, it's just going to be me by myself trying to look as pretty as I can for a team that wants to sign or draft me come next spring. Next up is Kelly Bryant, definitely a guy. Obviously, we know Kelly Bryant has been around for a bit with Clemson after taking over for Deshaun Watson. There was obviously, we talked about him a lot in the offseason during spring football due to the fact that he was kind of being outshined by the young stud Trevor Lawrence, and that begged the question: does Lawrence deserve a chance to start over Kelly Bryant this season? I think that we might eventually get there, but Dabo did put Kelly Bryant number one at the quarterback position on the depth chart, has reinstilled confidence in him, and I think that that's going to help him in the long run get to where he wants to go, and maybe get a chance to play Alabama again in a college football playoff game and try and avenge his loss from last season, because he was great in the regular season. He was, and then just came out absolutely flat against Alabama. And I think that's the fact that you're playing the ACC all year, and your toughest competition. I mean, last year, obviously, you played Miami in the conference title game and beat them pretty good. So that's your toughest competition all year, probably, was that Miami game. I think they played, Clemson played Notre Dame at the beginning of the year. They beat them too, so maybe that was too. But Miami was good last year. Miami with their turnover chain and everything, and the raw defense and some good offense as well, did get him in a position to play Clemson, and Kelly Bryant beat him. You got to give him credit. But then he comes back the next week or a couple weeks after and gets shellacked. But I can't really. I mean, what they score 6 points or 3 points on offense. They didn't. I don't think they got in the end zone against Alabama. So this year you're going to ask him for a bit more, or you're going to have the stud be right behind me. He's obviously been pushed by Trevor Lawrence, and being pushed is sometimes a good thing. It's going to push him to grow. Competition breeds better and more motivation for you. I mean, it's always nice to have somebody kind of breathing down your neck, and it'll really ask the question: okay, is he gonna take this and grab the bull by the horns and take this opportunity to succeed and say, no, it's not your turn yet, young buck. It's my turn. Or is he going to go into his shell and let the young kid step all over him? So that's the question. I don't think he's the latter is not the case. I think it's going to be more of the former, the fact that he's going to step up and take that job for what it is for himself, and say, it's my job. This is my job from last year. I'm taking this back for this year. You can have it later when I'm done. So this is a good sign for Kelly Bryant, but can he turn it into wins? Yes, he'll turn it into a lot of wins this season because of the fact they're in the ACC, but can he turn it into wins at the end of the year? That is the question, always for Kelly Bryant, obviously, coming into this season. I mean, obviously, this is a big high-profile program at Clemson, and you got to deal with everything that comes with that. The next guy is going to be DeAndre Swift at DeAndre Swift at Georgia. Love Georgia. Love their defense, love their offense. Obviously, Jake Fromm is that coming back for a sophomore season. Everybody's like, oh, is Jake Fromm, his job's in secure? I'm like, yeah, I think his job's pretty secure. He took your team to a college football playoff final or championship game and was within one play of winning that. But then you weren't even on the field when it happened. Like, you did everything you possibly could to get that win against Alabama. And he played very well, especially in that first half too, to get the lead there. But the defense could not hold on as Alabama to come back get the win. But he's just a freshman. He's got 3 more years to be able to try and do it again. And that Georgia defense is right there. And you got, like I said, DeAndre Swift, who you saw in that title game. The guy is good. Obviously, there's Sonny Michel's on the field too. So is Nick Chubb. Those guys are very good first-round draft picks. Well, Chubb close, but not quite. It's kind of interesting that Sonny Michel got drafted first. I mean, before him actually, by the Patriots of all teams. Then Chubb goes to the Browns. It's just the dichotomy of that is hilarious. This is a different conversation though. But for DeAndre Swift, I mean, he had a chance. He got touches in that game, and he showed off. I mean, the guy showed what he could do. I mean, when you got a 3-headed monster like that for Georgia, they were dangerous. But now he's going to be the number one guy. He's going to be that Nick Chubb. I think he's kind of a combination of both his guys, where he's got the speed, got the speed and quickness like Michel does, and be able to catch the ball in the backfield And then he also has the power that you saw from Nick Chubb, where he's able to break tackles. Nick Chubb broke a lot of tackles in the backfield last year. I think he's going to be a good little addition for the Browns. We'll see how many interesting. Got a crowded backfield there in Cleveland. Quick little NFL take, but we'll see how many touches he can get with Carlos Hyde and Duke Johnson there as well. But going back to the college football. We did go over a bunch of players as we come to the end of the show here. Touched on a bunch of different guys from coast to coast. We'll do that probably again on Friday as well. Go over some more individual players to look at as we go over the coaches in the ACC. We'll do the coaches in the Big 12 on Friday. That was pretty good. Obviously, we have there's some good coaches over there in the ACC. Some guys also looking to step up. Justin Fuente looking to get his program back where it was earlier with under Frank Beamer. You got a guy, Larry Fedora, who's shown that he can get his team to a good bowl game, get his team to an ACC championship game. Obviously, Mark Richt had a lot of success with Georgia, had a good success with Miami last year, and then of course Dabo, who's got the national championship under his belt there at Clemson, looking to do it again this season. All right, we'll be back on Friday. Everybody have a good middle of the week. Happy Wednesday, and we will talk to you later. Bye.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.